Have you ever wondered what type of situations you can run into with a septic system that's near a river? Well, today we have ourselves a fun one that was installed in 1988 on an old home from the 1800s that was once a church that apparently got converted into a domicile. This one's pretty neat because we run into a little bit of some problems, but I want to show you exactly what we're working with and what kind of situations you can run into if you're buying a home next to a river. So one of the very first things you need to know in Maryland, if you're within 1,000 foot of tidal water or any kind of source of water, like a river, stream, creek, whatever, usually you're going to get put into what's called the critical area. Now, the critical area is essentially any zone or property that's classified in a requirement for a nitrogen reducing septic system. The term we use for this is BAT, best available technology. Now, these systems are nitrogen reducing and they come with a lot more bells and whistles. Now, in Maryland, you're required by law to have it serviced once a year. So most homeowners will do their best to avoid these systems so that way they don't have the government knocking on their door and having any conversation with them, right? A normal gravity-fed system, you don't have to do anything at all. You just kind of live your life, do your thing. This particular circumstance, this system was installed in 1988, so they were before that sort of law became into effect. Usually any house between 2013 to now, you run the risk of seeing a BAT if you're near water. So what classifies as near water? Well, by the code book, it's 1,000 foot. And its linear foot is like the crow flies. So if you're 1,000 foot as far as you can get to it, that's pretty much going to put you in the zone. My usual rule of thumb is if you can see the water from the tank, you're probably within 1,000 foot. And the reason why this is a problem is that the nitrogen from our wastewater works its way into the ground, which then eventually works its way into the rivers, and based off the state's information, will work its way into the bay. Now, from the conversations I've had with the state and the local health departments, the concern with that nitrogen getting into the bay is that it creates algal blooms and disruptions to the local ecology in the bay itself. Now, my argument would be that the farmers, such as like people up in Pennsylvania and Ohio who are upstream from us, are the ones contributing the majority of the nitrogen. However, because we're at the bottom of the river, Maryland, are the ones who get to deal with it, right? So our laws require that houses that are near the rivers, waterways, etc., have to have this system and this technology. So let's take a look real quick at what kind of rivers we're working with so you can kind of see the style and the flow at which this type of property is going to be dealing with for the rivers near it and how big they are. So this property is a little bit more unique because it has two riverways kind of going around the house. So we can see that it's not super big, maybe about a foot and a half wide, and then it'll work its way all the way down to the road. The other side of the property has a little bit bigger of a little stream. Now this stream is roughly about 4 feet wide. And, again, both sides of these river just kind of encapsulate the property, just kind of makes a giant oval shape around the home. The other concern that we have with rivers like this is flooding. Whenever you have a river near a house, you run the risk of heavy rains, just like we just dealt with Milton and Helene coming through and dumping tons of rain on people in the south. Well, if you're by a river, when that rain comes, you run the risk of that river overfilling and potentially causing flooding. Now, if your river is that big, you've got bigger problems to deal with than your septic, but the county takes that sort of stuff into consideration when it comes to design, permitting, location, stuff of that nature. The reason it's important is to make sure that you're not putting a septic system in somewhere that gets a seasonal flood, right? Let's just say in the middle of May when we're getting a lot of rain, the river's elevated, you don't want that swamping out your septic system. For this particular property, our septic system is actually right next to the driveway, which kind of sucks. Right now we're introducing water to make sure everything's flowing the way that it's supposed to flow, nothing's backing up. But you can see here, this is the riser in the middle of the tank. That's the one river on the one leg of the house. Now this is pretty close. I haven't measured it yet, but eyeballing it, we're gonna be roughly about 20, 30 feet from tank to river. This puts us well within that 1,000 foot distance that we were talking about a moment ago. So in 1988, that was fine. But we do know that now, anytime we have to do any repairs or replacement to this system, the odds of us being able to keep this type of system is limited to none. One problem that we ran into for this particular property is because of the placement of the driveway, there's actually a collapse in one of the drain field lines, and they have distribution box issues. Now, normally, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, because all you do is you just dig up the box, replace the box, dig up the broken pipe, replace the pipe. But in this particular circumstance, now we got to deal with a driveway. So this is going to be our distribution box, right? So right here, we're going to have 2 drain fields that work their way over, and 1 drain field over here where that white flag is. Now, we have a collapse in the pipe, which is not lucky. The problem is this thing's right next to the driveway. So when it comes time to repair it, if you don't address the whole driveway situation, you're going to run into the same issue down the road if somebody parks a dumpster on it, runs like the asphalt machines, because this is all gravity fed. I'm not a driveway guy, so I don't even know what the asphalt machines are, but those real big, fat, boxy looking things that you see when people are doing driveways, those sorts of things, they look heavy. They probably are heavy. Most of the dump trucks that come over to help deal with the asphalt, those things are also pretty heavy. So when it comes time to replace that pipe, now we run into the problem of, what does the county say? In our county, right, we were supposed to pull permits on any pipe replacement going beyond 10 foot and whenever you replace a distribution box. As you pull a permit, that means the county is getting involved. We already have a defect, and this defect is close to the river. So even though it should be a simple repair of just repairing the pipe and the distribution box, once you pull the permit, you run the risk of the county coming in and saying, hey, we don't like this system at all. You got to do much more. And that kind of puts people into a goofy spot. Leave a comment below, though. Let me know. As a homeowner, what would you do in this situation? Would you pull the permit, right? Would you attempt to deal with the county and whatever kind of consequences come, right? Such as, like, if you pull the permit and the county says, hey, you got to replace the distribution box, the tank, the trenches, etc., with all this advanced treatment systems, what would you do, right? Have you ever been in this situation? Has your system ever failed on you and you got stuck because you're next to a river? Have you ever had a collapse? Do you have a driveway over your system? Leave a comment below, because your story may help somebody else who's dealing with the same situation navigate their problem with more efficiency, right? Maybe what you've done could help them do whatever they got to do. As always, though, check with your local contractors, the county, health department, etc., because they're the ones who know what you can and cannot do in your local area. This type of situation with a river being near a house is not a super common one, but it does happen from time to time, especially with older houses. These older homes, they would usually be closer to water, just for, living, right? Farming, stuff like that. So a lot of times you'll see most homes that are next to a river usually are older houses. Older homes always come with a variety of issues. Now, this particular one was installed in 1988. So as long as the pipe that's crushed can be fixed, they should be fine for quite a while to go. They just have to know, like, hey, when it comes time to repair, they're going to have some problems. But let's just say, for sake of argument, this system was installed in the 1950s. At that point, now you're kind of getting towards the end of its septic life, or it already has failed. That's where you run into some problems. So I always recommend, if you have a house with their system by the river, make sure you get it maintained. Pump out the tank, take care of it, have it looked at regularly to make sure that you know what's coming and you can deal with it appropriately. The big thing you also have to know if you're purchasing a house by a river is that if you're in Maryland, you could end up with these advanced treatment systems or some kind of innovative configuration to the system. The more creative you have to get for a septic system, the more expensive that repair ends up getting. The reason for this is the water, right? In our area, you have to be 100 foot away from the rivers. Now, sometimes that can be really difficult whenever it comes down to, the placement of the house, the placement of the well, placement of the neighbor's well, but you got to get as far away from it as you possibly can. Then you got to worry about the water table, you got to worry about seasonal floodplains. There's a lot of factors that get into it, and the more complicated the situation gets, the more expensive it ends up getting. So if you're purchasing a new home, or if you're buying a house that's an old house but it's new to you, if you're buying a house and it's got an old septic system, you need to be careful. I always recommend, if you're ever buying a house on well and septic, pull the permits from the local health department. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're $10, $15. It's worth every penny just to know what on that property exists, and is it something you have to worry about, right? Usually where we run into our biggest problems is these old houses by the river. The county has nothing on file, and that's usually when I find a metal tank, a cinder block tank, a cesspool, something that's dangerous and or no longer acceptable in the state of Maryland. So I hope that this was a informative video for you. I hope you gained some value out of this, right? If you found this interesting in any way, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I don't come across properties by rivers that often, and so when I do, I think it's interesting, and I wanted to have this conversation with you. If you have any comments or suggestions for future videos or areas of conversation you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.